Hey guys, John V here from PhoneArena. You're watching our video comparison between the new iPad, the 3rd generation one, and the Google Nexus 7. We know by now the iPad has been out for a while. It's still the top-selling tablet out there in the market, and it really hasn't seen a competitor that could rival its sales volume. Now we have the Google Nexus 7, priced at $200, and has a lot to offer, so it's going to be interesting to see how they both compete against one another. Before anything else, the first thing you really have to decide upon is just which is the perfect size for you. And between the two, we definitely like the Google Nexus 7. Again, with the smaller display, it makes for, easier to handle with one hand and doesn't feel too heavy. And it also feels very natural, whereas the iPad, larger display, of course, and heavier, so it does get a little bit tiresome after holding it for some time, especially with one hand. You need to really use two hands with this guy. The designs are pretty much just generic, nothing really spectacular, very contemporary with their looks. Choice of materials, again, they're vastly different. For $200, you get the modest choice of materials with the Google Nexus 7. Still decent, nice build quality to it. It has this rubbery texture to the back. Is it a clean look? Same thing applies to the new iPad, but seeing that it is priced more at $500 starting off, you get those better materials. You have the aluminum body here, very solid, and they're both, have all the qualities you'd like. Very streamlined, thin, but when it comes down to just comfort, we definitely like the Google Nexus 7. Visually, we like the displays of both tablets. They're pleasant and also sharp looking, but we gotta hand it to the iPad's Retina display. It's just more stunning versus its rival. First and foremost, just resolution. It has a higher resolution, of course. For most things, you might not notice the difference, but it's most evident with things like the web browser. When you're in a zoomed out view, it's just a lot more legible and easier on the eyes to look at with the iPad's Retina display. Secondly, color reproduction. They're both IPS displays, so you get some nice looking colors, but the iPad's Retina display just has more natural tones, whereas the Google Nexus 7, it washes out a little bit, and on top of that, it has a subtle, cooler reproduction, so whites tend to be a little bit on the bluish side, and overall, we just prefer the iPad's Retina display. Both tablets feature front-facing cameras, but with the Google Nexus 7, only certain apps have access to it. With the iPad, of course, you also get the advantage of a rear camera, so in a worst-case scenario, you could always rely on the iPad to take photos as well. The connection ports of both tablets are located in the bottom edge. We definitely like the micro USB port on the Google Nexus 7 more, just because it's universal, whereas the iPad relies on the usual 30-pin proprietary connection. We definitely like the physical buttons on the iPad just because both the dedicated power button and the volume control, they're raised, very distinctive to the touch, and they have really nice responses when you press them down. In contrast, the Google Nexus 7 buttons, they're raised a little bit, so kind of difficult to feel out, and on top of that, they're placed on this angle, so it even makes it even more difficult to feel them out, but at least their responses are also tactile. As for the rest, the location of their speakers are found in the rear. It's the strip right here in the back of the Google Nexus 7, and on the iPad, it's on the bottom left corner in the rear. The Google Nexus 7 has the 3.5mm headset jack placed on the bottom edge, which they say is less prone for it to be removed as you're using the tablet, whereas the iPad has it in the usual spot in the top left corner. We've had several comparisons between iOS and Android devices, but this time around there's a slight twist just because the Google Nexus 7 is sporting the most up-to-date version of the platform, Android 4.1 Jelly Bean to be exact, and it brings forth some new refinements that really solidify and strengthen the overall experience. But between the two, we definitely like the iPad's simplicity with its operation. It's by far the easier platform to understand and get used to, very intuitive, so most people will gravitate for its simplicity, whereas Android has a lot more complexity with its styling and its usage, but there's still a lot more stuff going on than just that. For example, when it comes to personalization, hands down, Android 4.1 Jelly Bean blows anything that iOS has to offer. You have all the various different types of wallpapers. You could even switch it to live wallpaper to have a dynamic look. On top of that, you have all the rich widgets available to you, so you get some functionality right from the home screen, which is definitely nice, and just makes for a very personal look versus the iPad. Again, it's very simple, and you could tell that with the home screen layout, it hasn't changed since day one. It's your typical static view with the grid-like icons. Interestingly enough, both tablets rely on some gestures to move around the platform. For example, they both have the swipe down feature from the top bezel to gain access to the notifications panel. The Google Nexus 7 has the swipe up from the bottom bezel to gain access to the Google Now function. And in the web browser, we definitely like how you could switch between open windows by just simply doing some gestures from the side bezels here. But we actually find the iPad's implementation a little bit more useful. For example, when you're in an open application, you could quickly switch and move around various apps just by swiping like like that. And on top of that, you could always get back to the home screen by just doing another gesture like that. We just find it a lot more useful versus having to navigate and juggle around the task manager tray here with the Google Nexus 7. When it comes to checking out the core organizer apps, the experience isn't different between the two. Actually, they're both very similar. So for things like the calculator, the address book, and the calendar, they're both tablet optimized. So they make good use of the real estate. And in the landscape, they typically give you this two-panel view, which is very optimal. However, when it comes to email, though, we definitely prefer the Gmail experience found with the Google Nexus 7, just because you get all the rich features that you associate with the Gmail experience on a desktop. Typing isn't that much of a problem with both tablets, just because with their respective keyboards, they're very instantaneous and responsive, so they're able to keep up with that rate of input. But between the two, when it comes to portrait usage, we definitely prefer the Google Nexus 7 with its smaller display. Our thumbs are better able to actually encompass the entire layout, whereas on the iPad, we got to kind of stretch out a little bit more to get to specific buttons. But you could always go with the split keyboard there as well. In terms of landscape usage, though, hands down, we prefer the iPad for that one. We briefly mentioned notifications earlier, but between the two, we definitely like the implementation that the Google Nexus 7 has to offer with Android 4.1 Jelly Bean, just because it offers a lot more functionality while you're inside the actual notifications tray. It also utilizes some various gestures, so you could expand notification emails, and there are even, to an extent, you get some sharing functionality all directly from the notifications panel. When it comes to raw processing power, both are quite swift with their operations. The Google Nexus 7 is powered by a quad-core NVIDIA Tegra 3 processor versus the dual-core Apple A5X processor inside the iPad, the new iPad. Both are very fast and responsive. You can tell even with the home screen, barely any evidence of any lag or slowdown. Every now and then you might see some delays, but it's nothing bad. And even other basic operations, opening up applications, pinch zooming, you could tell how buttery smooth they both are. There isn't a definitive winner when it comes to the web browsing experience on these two tablets, just because they work pretty much in the same manner and the experience is the same. You have Safari on the iPad and Chrome browser on the Google Nexus 7, though you can also get the Chrome browser on iOS as well. But they load up pages in a good amount of time, doesn't take too long, and on top of that, they maintain some really nice responsive movements, kinetic scrolling, pinch zooming pretty quick, though with the Chrome browser, there's just a little bit of delay sometimes when it comes to rendering stuff, but for the most part, they're both exactly alike. Seeing that the iPad's music player hasn't changed with its presentation since previous iPads, we definitely like the music player on the Google Nexus 7 for the simple reason that it has that cool 3D-like carousel when you're browsing through your titles in landscape, whereas on the iPad it has that traditional grid-like view, nothing too fancy. As far as audio quality, they're both exceptionally strong. Surprisingly, with the Google Nexus 7, it maintains a really strong output on parts of what's available with the iPad, but we like that the equalizer settings are available directly from within the app, and you could also have some manual adjustments. With the iPad, you gotta go through the main menu settings to adjust them. Mainly because it has a larger display and just sharper, we prefer the iPad for watching videos. The one we have here is encoded in MPEG-4. You can tell both are running exceptionally fast, fluid, good details, but the iPad still seems to be the better between the two, just because with the Retina display, it's a lot more stunning to look at, brighter colors, and on top of that, better viewing angles as well, so it's definitely ideal in this case scenario. Another advantage found with the iPad is the fact that it packs a rear camera, so you can take photos and videos on the go with you, whereas on the Google Nexus 7, it's not an option whatsoever. We know that some people wouldn't even fathom trying to use a tablet to take photos or videos, but in a worst case scenario, if it's the last resort, the last thing that's around you, or the only thing around you, it's definitely nice that you'll be able to do that with the iPad. If you're big into storing multimedia content in your device, you might want to look at the iPad over its rival, just because with the Nexus 7, it's only available in 8 and 16 gigabyte capacity, so you got to be really stringent in what you put on there. On the other hand, the iPad is available in 16, 32, and 64 gigabyte options, so you have a little bit more flexibility. Yet another reason that makes the platform experience so gratifying on the Google Nexus 7 over its counterparts, the fact that it features the Google Now function with Android 4.1 Jelly Bean. Essentially, it is your personal digital assistant. It provides relevant suggestions based on your search history, your location, and it provides for things like the weather, sports scores, directions, and even traffic on your route. So the more you use it, the more it learns your habits, and it's just nice that it's able to keep track on certain things and provide those relevant suggestions. Having both tablets connected to the same Wi-Fi hotspot in another room, we didn't have any issues as far as fluctuations with Wi-Fi signal strength, nor did we have any issues as far as drop connections. Additionally, we're extremely content with the exceptional battery life that we're able to get on both tablets. Easily solid day, even on the heaviest of usage. But between the two, it just seems like the Google Nexus 7 is just a little bit more battery optimized with a variety of different things, and it does give a little bit more juice versus the iPad. Seriously, people, you're looking at the two best tablets out there on the market, but ultimately, it's going to come down to personal preference as which one's going to be the ideal one for you. So it's $500 for the new iPad versus $200 for the Google Nexus 7. Big difference in pricing, but it is justified just because for the $500 you're going to pay with the iPad, you're getting one killer tablet that really shows its worth. For example, you get some killer specs, you get that dual-core processor, you have also the Retina display, a very stunning one, the best out there on the market, and it also has a very solid construction. Choice materials are definitely something you'd pay $500 for. A nice aluminum body, and you have also the advantage of shooting photos and videos with a rear camera, something that's not available with the Google Nexus 7. And even though iOS might not be as comprehensive with its offerings versus Jelly Bean 4.1, some people will appreciate the fact that it's more intuitive, easy to learn, and overall just simple. And again, those are some qualities that people appreciate in the tablet. On the other hand, if you want something that's more compact, save you on your money, then you want to stick with the Google Nexus 7. Biggest thing about it is $200 price point. You still get one respectable tablet. It might not have some killer specs, but some admirable ones still in there, like a quad-core processor. You have all the rich features you find with Android 4.1 Jelly Bean, and that's what really makes it stand out. A lot of new features and refinements that really strengthen its appeal amongst the competition out there. But either or, again, it's going to come down to just personal preference. If you want something that's larger, then the iPad. If not, then go with the Google Nexus 7. But both are just wonderful tablets, and you won't go wrong with your decision. So if you'd like to learn more about both tablets, guys, you can check out our website, PhoneArena.com. This is John V. As always, thanks for watching.